All right, pardon the interruption here. I know I promised you guys a return to the Ten Commandments series, but I have another one that is top of mind here. We're going to get to it. Don't worry about it. This is Dave with the Believe Podcast. Welcome back in. We are going to get back to the Ten Commandments, I promise. It's always nice to have that in the holster, right? Like have something to, I guess for me to look forward to. Hopefully you do as well. But we have to take a brief break on that to discuss something that is hugely topical. And I'm talking about in this episode, we're going to, I'm not going to talk about politics, but I am going to give my political stance in this one. It's kind of interesting because it is a twist. It's probably not something that you are used to. We are living in a highly testy political time. I've never seen the nation more divided in the US of A here than I have in the current era. I've never seen people so divided and so polar opposite on both sides. It's kind of driving me nuts and it's driving me crazy. This is also political and topical because as I'm recording this, this is just after the Super Bowl weekend. I'm not sure when this episode's going to drop, but the Super Bowl just went down, and got me thinking. Man, I kind of long for the days where the Super Bowl halftime show was just about entertainment and not some sort of political tightrope that we have to walk down, or wonder what kind of undertones are going to get thrown in, and what kind of message and what kind of backlash and all this other kind of stuff is going to come up from it. It's just crazy. It's crazy stuff that we're living in. It just got me thinking, as for the title of this episode here too. And I've titled this one, what side would Jesus be on? What side would our faith be on here? It's kind of crazy, Again, I keep talking about that "What would Jesus do?" bracelet. It's kind of insane how top of mind that is. Like, we always have to kind of remind ourselves of that, in particular if we're practicing our faith, right? We want to make sure that we always keep that top of mind. And I'm saying that, and I'm slowing my words down for you guys here in order for you to remember that, because that's basically the message of this entire podcast in general, but definitely of this episode here as well. And I'm just gonna jump right to what I think my answer would be on this one, and then maybe circle back around to it at the end. But first, let me put in my bid here for the usual asking for your comments. Hopefully this one gets a little bit more traction, because I think it's a little bit more, again, top of mind. It's a huge topic that a lot of people are talking about nowadays. So drop your comments on YouTube and Spotify. Let me know here what your thoughts are on this topic. Where does faith kind of belong in the political landscape here? But let me just dive right into what I think the answer would be. And if you were to ask me what side would Jesus be on, honestly, I don't think JC has a political stance, or he would pick a certain side. And I'm gonna go and talk about some of the other bullet points that I have here, and then I'll circle back around to defending my opinion on that. There, I have some decent ones, but I don't want to rush into it, so I want to kind of build up to it there for you guys, leave you in a little bit of suspense here, or just urge you to listen to the rest of the episode here before skipping to the end. So let's get into a couple other topics around this. Number one, let me just tell you what my political stance is as well. Honestly, I thought I was leaning towards a particular stance, and I thought I was going to one side over the other. And the more I think about it, the more I just kind of want to, like I said, follow in the footsteps of Jesus here and just go. I don't want to pick a side. And again, I'll explain what I mean on that later, but I believe not picking a side is walking more closely with your faith and with religion here. And I hear all the time, and I've heard from at least a couple of people super close to me that, well, if you don't speak up, if you don't use your voice, if you don't, go out there and start, saying something or doing something, then you're just, letting the world wash over you. You're letting everything happen around you, and you're not doing what you need to do in order to essentially choose a side. And that's what everybody keeps telling me that I should do. Anybody who wants to have some sort of political conversation with you, that's sort of the vibe that always comes out is, what side do you stand on? And if you don't have a side, well, speak up. You better have a side, kind of thing. And honestly, guys, like I've always hated politics. I've always thought it was such a polarizing thing. I don't believe that, in general conversation, that you will be able to convince somebody else of your beliefs. I don't believe that having a heated discussion, even if it is trying to keep it, on the low key, on the down low, so to speak, ever really amounts to anything constructive or positive. I'm not sure I honestly believe in a bipartisan, like a truly bipartisan, peaceful coalition of ideas anymore, especially when you're talking about the political landscape. Maybe it was at one point in time, but or maybe that's how it was originally conceived or constructed, especially our democracy and what we're looking at here in America. But I don't think it really is anymore. I think it's very toxic. I think it is very, I don't know. In certain ways, I kind of view it as evil. I kind of view it as just like a negative, just like a bad cloud kind of hanging over our heads constantly. And I don't really believe that there's a lot of positive stuff that can come out of two different sides trying to talk through these topics anymore. So honestly, like I've always had that viewpoint. I have voted certain ways here or there, but and had my own viewpoints on certain things, but I'm not going to get into those. I'm not going to tell you like exactly how I voted and all this other kind of stuff. But um, I honestly, the more I think about it, the more I'm just like, I don't know if I really want to do it anymore, honestly. So it's kind of interesting, I'm getting to this point now, especially now with this current landscape that we're in. It has just become so ugly and so nasty, and I don't believe that there's always one side, honestly, like in my mind there's always that one side who thinks I am completely right, I know what's right, I'm standing on this side with my feet firmly in the ground because this is what I believe in and this is what I hold true. And inevitably you've got the exact same type of person just on the other viewpoint, on the other side of the fence, saying the exact same thing for their side. And that's where the polarity comes in. That's where people come in and they go like, you have to pick a side. You got to choose. And I'm saying like, I don't think I do. No, I don't want to. Right. And people have such like anger towards that as well. Like I'll try to like say my piece on that. They'll be like, "Oh, what do you mean? Like how there's no way. Like you have to have a stance on something." People who get like really heated about that, it like really bugs them, and it kind of bugs me in turn. Where I'm kind of just like, well, let me have my viewpoint and leave me alone, right? So that's one point that I have to say about that. The next thing I'm going to talk about here is the connection to religion and humanity and how religious people and religious figures in our world here and in our lives tend to also take a stance. And I tend to talk about my aunt a lot because she is one of the most religious people that I've known, and it's this idea like even she has a stance, even she takes a side, and I think it's kind of funny too because I honestly kind of roping it back around to that central point. I don't know if you really can pick a side here if your side is religion. But another point that I want to mention here is that it kind of bugs me that even the papacy, right? Even the Pope and the quote unquote Holy Catholic Church. And if you've listened to episodes before, you kind of know my viewpoint a little bit on that so far. Even they take stances. Now they're not supposed to, but there's that fine line again where they're only really supposed to like tell you what they believe the church would do. They shouldn't. And you don't normally hear this. You don't normally hear certain things like vote for this other candidate, or you have to vote for this person or that person because this is their belief system, or this is where they stand on this certain topic. But it seems to me that they also don't really have any qualms about speaking on a certain political topic either. And that's what bugs me more so than anything. It's not that they're pointing out individuals in particular. Sometimes they do. Sometimes they name drop, and I think that's wrong as well. But they seem to have no issues whatsoever in saying, like, well, this candidate has a certain stance on something, so we're gonna butt in here and we're gonna say what we think the church would do on that topic. And I don't know if anybody's asking the church for their opinion on that before they give that opinion, or if they're just giving it freely. But to me, it just kind of bugs me that they just don't really have any issues going like, well, we're going to step in when it comes to political topics, and we're going to tell you how the church would run it, and this is what the church would do, kind of thing. That kind of bugs me at times, because I'm not saying like the church shouldn't have a voice, but what I'm saying is they should continually be driving home a message, and that message kind of ropes into my answer here at the end of the episode. But the message, honestly, without getting into it too deeply here, revealing too much before the end here, should really just be about the church teaching. It should be about that message, and staying away, in my opinion, from directly pointing out certain topics, or bills, or anything like that kind of comes up in politics. It's just it's such a negative arena that I don't even know if the church should really be jumping in on political topics there. That's just my 2 cents on that. And I'm sure that even that is something that people might rip me apart for, going like, of course they should, like they should have their own voice and blah blah blah. I'm not saying that they shouldn't, again, but when it comes to jumping in on certain things, I don't know if talking more directly in that space makes the most sense. Okay, I'm gonna wrap it back around here and kind of give my big reveal here. And it shouldn't really come as a surprise to any of you, especially if you practice in your faith. If Even if you read scripture, if you're diving deep on the Bible, if you're going to church, if you have religious mentors, or whatever. If you consider yourself religious at all, and you're following God, you're following Jesus and His works and whatnot. To me, again, roping it back around, I don't think Jesus would have a side. Let's take it back, okay? Let's go all the way back to his time. Let's go back to Jesus when he lived. You think he was going around saying F Herod and screw Pontius Pilate and spitting in his face when, he was passing down his sentence for death? No, he wasn't doing that. He wasn't doing any of that. Jesus wasn't out there rioting in the streets, throwing anger tantrums, and again saying stick it to the man, and no kings and all this other kind of stuff. Whatever the current the current topic is of the day. He wasn't doing any of that, and he wasn't involved in politics. And I think that's very important here. Not because I'm trying to defend a side here. If you think everything that I've been saying here has some sort of undertones, or that I'm aligning myself with a certain political party or a side, then you've completely missed the entire message of this episode. If that is something that you honestly believe that I'm trying to do with everything that I'm saying in this episode, then just maybe consider not listening to this episode. If you're thinking that everybody's got a side, everybody has undertones, everybody's trying to like, manipulate and worm their way in, or try to slip certain things in here or there, or try to say something without directly saying something, then this episode is kind of flying over your head. That's not what I'm saying at all. What I'm saying here is walking like Jesus or walking in his footsteps means that he did not take a political stance. I don't think he was out in the forums with his followers and preaching the good news about our Lord here and then saying, like, oh, well, this candidate mostly aligns with me, so this person gets it, and you have to back this person because their political viewpoints align with the faith. I'm going to take a quick side tangent here to talk about that as well too, because I've mentioned this before. Politics and religion tend to get intertwined, and that's what bugs me, I think, the most, is because, again, we are using religion in another forum in order to drive a specific stance or message, and that is wrong. This is what I have talked about in, the the first two commandments and those episodes as well. I briefly covered this idea that if you are using religion for your own means, whatever it is, doesn't have to be politics, it could be anything else, greed, money, power, whatever. If you're using it for some other kind of means, that is wrong. That is not what religion is for. And I really like, and again, I don't like to use the word hate because it's such a strong word, but I hate when all of these different arenas tend to throw religion in the mix and bring faith into whatever topic we're talking about. And politics is no different here. So I really hate that aspect. And in politics, the age old debate is always around pro life or pro choice, right? And it's, you have to take this stance. Well, if you consider yourself a religious person, you consider yourself following God, then you have to be on the side of pro life. So that means you have to be Republican. Really? So essentially, what you're saying is you have to, because you have this one stance on this one arena, you have to align with a certain political party because that's what your religion says. Horse crap. That is unbelievable. And again, not to take a certain political side. What I'm saying is it shouldn't even be in the arena to begin with. It should not be there. We should not be talking about religion when it comes to certain topics. Now, honestly, this is difficult because, and that's in particular, what I try to do with this entire podcast here is to try to interweave real life scenarios into our faith and into our religion. So you might be thinking to yourself, well, Dave, like how can you do that? How can you separate out religion from politics just because, you don't agree with it kind of mixing in? Like, of course, it's going to mix into every single facet of our lives, and politics should be no different. Okay, I'd say you have some sort of decent argument there, but in my mind, I'm tending to lean more towards the idea that we as human beings tend to break that commandment and use religion to drive a particular viewpoint. And in doing so, that's wrong. In using religion in order to get your way or to gain some sort of, followers or following from it, that's wrong. You shouldn't do that. Now, you can have your own personal viewpoints on how religion ties into politics or any other topic. Sure, go ahead. But in my mind, keep them separate and keep them different. You can have certain viewpoints, but it doesn't necessarily mean if you believe a certain way that you have to follow a certain political party. BS. Like, no. Please keep that separate. It's not going to happen. I mean, it's going to continue to happen for the rest of our lives. But Again, I like to go to the whole religious and holy wars that have been reigning forever, where people are being persecuted and killed based off of their religious beliefs on something. How is that any different than tying religion into politics, right? Um, and look at what's happened. Look at how people have died because of that. Not only in the current times, we've had a couple of examples of that already, but just historically as well, when you try to polarize certain people. I'm not necessarily saying that happened in the more current examples, but you get what I'm saying. Like, it definitely happens, and it has been roped in the past. So please try to keep that separate. That's what I urge anybody who's listening out there to try and do with this particular topic. Try to keep those two separated as much as you can, and don't align either your political viewpoints or any other topic that we're talking about with one particular stance because of your religion. And again, I'm not taking a political side on that. I'm just saying keep those separate. All right. So we're back around to there was a little tangent there. I want to rope it back in here to how I view Jesus, or what would Jesus say about this topic in particular, especially if we're talking about current political stances or the political environment that we're in nowadays. Honestly, if I were to ask him, I don't think that he would. Again, in my opinion, I don't think that he would take a side. This is Jesus's side, and it always has been. Okay, and it's not a political side. His side is always around peace, love, humility, kindness, caring for other people, good deeds. The list goes on and on. Any like positive adjective that you can think of here. I just threw out a few, but that's the side that he was on. He wasn't taking a political stance. Somebody were to ask him like, "Hey, who'd you vote for?" First of all, I don't think that he would vote, honestly. And second of all, he would say, "I am on the side of God. I'm on the side of my faith and religion." What did he tell Peter? Those who live by the sword die by the sword, right? That's another example there too. And that was a prime example when he was getting detained by the Roman guards and being brought in for questioning originally. I think supposedly the fight broke out, and I don't know. I think it was Peter or somebody ended up cutting off one of the guards' ears, and Jesus literally told him, "Those who live by the sword die by the sword." It's the same thing here. Okay, now that honestly wasn't about politics directly, and that was about violence, but you get the idea from that example. He's on the side of caring about other people, about love for other people. Now, and it's similar with me and my wife. Now, my wife also takes her own stance on politics, and has her own pretty strong viewpoint as well. But the one thing that we both agree on here in particular is that we are on the side of humanity. And I think Jesus is also on the side of humanity, but not from a political standpoint. Again, don't try to take any kind of undertones from that and say, well, Dave said he's on the side of humanity, so he's affiliated with this political party because of that. It's like, no, don't lump me into something and make that accusation because I'm saying that I'm on the side of peace, love, and humanity. Because that's not what I'm talking about. What I'm saying is that my wife and I are on the side of humanity, about caring for other people, about treating people humanely, and making people care for other people, about not putting people down, not persecuting people, not like doing blanket stereotyping and all this other kind of stuff, but rather being on the side of peace, love, harmony, humanity, that kind of stance. And again, to me, that's not a political stance. You could look at this here and say, and I've been trying my hardest all episode not to name drop, and I think I'm going to stick to it. But you get the idea. We're in 2026, so you know who's in office. You could say here that if you're on the side of humanity, then you're sticking with a certain political party, because the other party, oh man, they're out there in the streets, and they're again, this is crazy that we have to think like this, but you could, I've heard it said, and again, this is not coming from me, but this is just what I've heard around the water cooler here, that if you're aligning with humanity, then that means that you're against a certain political party because they're rounding people up. This is the next Nazi regime, and all this other kind of stuff. So that means you must be on this certain political side, because the other side is, oh man, they're just, they're doing genocide. They're rounding people up and treating them inhumanely and throwing them into cells and ripping people from families and blah 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 blah. There's always going to be two sides to every story. I hate politics. I hate talking about that topic. And honestly, again, the more that I think about it, the more I got to play like Switzerland and say, I'm going to refrain. I'm not going to choose a side here, because the side that I want to be on, the side that I want to align with, is my faith and my religion and Jesus and God. And what I honestly believe Jesus would do is not pick a side. I think the side that he is on is not a side that is out there. I don't know. I could be wrong here, because I don't know all the political affiliations and stances and whatnot. Like, that maybe there is a political party that is like this out there. But as far as I know, there really isn't. It's kind of just like the church and then a bunch of other politics that go into it, because, politics contains a lot of different things under the hood, right? Governmental policies, education, dissemination of taxpayer dollars and funds and all this other kind of stuff, right? And the church isn't really about this. As far as I know, and, again, correct me if I'm wrong here, there might be a political party that has this stance, but not that I'm aware of. So to me, there is no political stance here. There isn't one. Like, to me, if you're considering yourself more of a religious person and you are siding with God and Jesus, that is your stance, which isn't really a political one, I guess, is kind of what I'm getting to. Jesus would have refrained. Jesus would not say anything about a certain side. I think he would be on the side of, again, peace, love, humanity, kindness, good deeds, helping out the poor. That's what he did all the time. That was his 9 to 5. That's what he preached. He wasn't out there taking a political stance. He was out there talking about how we should treat one another. I think a lot of times, especially when you're talking about politics and all these other topics, we forget that. We start going down, again, these negative avenues, thinking that we're right, thinking that, our viewpoint is best or superior and blah, 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 blah. And that to me is wrong. That's not what it's about. What it's about is aligning yourself with your religion. That to me is the only stance worth taking, in my opinion. That's the only one to me that I know with exact certainty in my mind is correct, because that will always lead you to your faith and to God. And that's what really helps drive me forward a lot of times, especially when we're talking about all these different topics. All right, I'm going to leave it there. Thanks for sticking with me on this one and getting my political viewpoints. And hopefully you couldn't really get my political viewpoints in this episode. And that's the whole point. Again, if you were thinking that I had any kind of undertones with this episode, then that's not what this is about. Maybe go back and replay it, and maybe you'll understand the exact message that I was trying to talk about here, which again is, I don't think Jesus would have a stance in this arena. Okay, guys, I'm going to circle it back around again. Need those comments here. Come on, light it up. But please, please, please do not take a political stance in your response here. If you're dropping a comment on this episode here, let's keep it about what the main topic is about. Let's talk about why faith and religion should just be about that. Should just be about preaching our faith and religion and not taking a certain stance. Now, honestly, even if you do have your own opinion, I'm sure people are going to say it anyway, because that's just what it's all about when we're talking about politics. So, I want to get your personal anecdotes about this. Do you take a stance? Like, do you have a firm political stance, but still consider yourself religious? Like, let me know all about that. I kind of want to, I want to get the discussion started. I want to hear where you stand on it. What your honest opinion is about it. You don't necessarily just have to agree with me on this, so I'm definitely open to all of the comments, political or otherwise, on this episode. I feel like I'm opening some bad floodgates on this one, but I did it to myself in kicking up this highly debatable and divisive topic. But let me know all about it in your comments on YouTube. You can also find me on Spotify here. Light it up. Let's get the discussion started, and let me know your viewpoints. What would Jesus do here, guys? What do you think would be Jesus's stance on the political environment, and not necessarily just here in North America? If you're listening in a different country, let me know about what's going on in your country as well, and what you think Jesus would do over there. All right, guys, that's going to do it. I'm going to wrap it up. Thanks so much for listening to this one. I promise we'll get back to the commandments at some point, maybe in the next episode, but maybe I'll throw in another filler. Not sure, but thanks again, and I'll see you on the next one.